He bought the 19-year-old virgin bride for $3, her scream echoed when the cowboy knelt. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Clara stood on the creaking wooden platform in Dusthaven's sun-scorched square, her wrists bound loosely with hemp rope, her heart pounding like a war drum. The town, a ramshackle cluster of saloons and weathered storefronts, buzzed with the murmurs of men, miners, drifters, and ranchers, gathered for the auction. At 19, Clara was alone, her father dead from fever, their homestead claimed by debts. The banker, a vulture in a tailored suit, had declared her property to settle the family's accounts. $3, he barked, his voice cutting through the dry air. Clara's eyes, green as sagebrush, darted across the crowd, defiance warring with fear. Then a shadow moved forward, a tall cowboy, his hat low, his face half hidden by a weak stubble. Elias Kane raised a hand, his voice low but firm. "I'll take her for the 3. The crowd hushed. Clara's breath caught, her future now tethered to a stranger. The wagon rattled over the uneven trail, sagebrush and red rock stretching endlessly under a blazing sky. Clara sat rigid beside Elias, her hands clutching the edge of the seat, the $3 transaction burning in her mind. He hadn't spoken since Dusthaven, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon, reins loose in his calloused hands. She stole glances at him. Broad shoulders, a scar tracing his jaw, a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken despite her anger. "Why me?" she finally demanded, her voice sharp. Elias glanced at her, his gaze unreadable. "Didn't buy you to own you," he said softly. "Bought you to free you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning she couldn't yet grasp. The silence that followed was charged, her resentment clashing with a flicker of curiosity about the man beside her. Night fell over the canyon, stars piercing the velvet sky. Elias built a fire, its crackling warmth pushing back the desert chill. Clara sat across from him, her shawl tight around her shoulders, watching the flames dance in his eyes. He handed her a tin cup of coffee, his fingers brushing hers, an accidental touch that sent a shiver through her. "Why'd you kneel?" she asked, recalling the moment in Dusthaven when he'd dropped to one knee after the auction, his hat in hand, as if in reverence. Her scream had been raw, born of confusion and fear, echoing off the town's walls. Elias looked away, his voice low. "Knew a girl once," he said. "Lost her to men like that banker. Swore I'd never let it happen again." His words cracked something open in Clara, her guarded heart softening as she saw the regret etched into his face. The firelight blurred the line between them, desire stirring in the quiet. A sudden thunderstorm swept over the plains, lightning splitting the sky. Elias pulled Clara into a shallow cave, their clothes soaked, their bodies pressed close in the cramped space. Her breath hitched as his warmth seeped into her, his hands steadying her shoulders. "You're safe," he murmured, but his voice was rough, his eyes dark with something unspoken. Clara's heart raced, not from fear but from the electric pull between them. She reached out, her fingers grazing his chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath his shirt. "Why do you care?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Because you're more than a price tag," he said. Their lips hovered inches apart, the storm outside mirroring the tempest within them, restraint fraying as trust began to bloom. Dawn broke over the mesa, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. Clara and Elias stood outside their camp, the air crisp, the world quiet. He'd promised to take her to a new town, a fresh start, but Clara's heart tugged her toward him. "You don't owe me anything," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Elias turned, his eyes searching hers, then slowly dropped to one knee again, just as he had in Dusthaven. This time he held out a small silver ring, scavenged from his past. "I knelt to honor you, Clara," he said, his voice raw. "Not to claim you, but to ask, will you stay?" Her scream this time was one of joy, a release of fear and hope, echoing across the desert as she pulled him to his feet, their lips meeting in a fierce, tender kiss that sealed their bond. The story follows Clara's journey from desperation to empowerment, as she navigates her loss of agency and finds strength through her connection with Elias. Elias, haunted by his past, seeks redemption, his act of kneeling symbolizing respect and a rejection of the transactional cruelty that defined Clara's sale. The harsh 1880s frontier setting, dusty trails, starlit canyons, and stormy nights, mirrors their internal struggles and amplifies the sensual tension. Societal expectations embodied by the auction and the banker's greed contrast with the growing trust and mutual vulnerability between Clara and Elias. Her scream, initially born of fear and later joy, marks her emotional evolution, culminating in a passionate, authentic romance.